The news feeds across the galaxy all carried the same message that morning. The human Third Fleet was moving toward the Outer Rim territories. On a dozen different worlds, in 100 different languages, the reaction was the same: fear. Captain Ji-hoon Park stood on the bridge of the UES Resilience, watching the stars streak past as his fleet moved through hyperspace. He didn't know that his movements were being tracked by every major news network in civilized space. He didn't know that trade routes were being rerouted to avoid his projected path. All he knew was that Command had given him patrol orders, and he would follow them. "Captain, we're receiving multiple communication attempts," reported Communications Officer Min-jun Lee from his station. "Mostly from trade vessels, asking about our intentions." Ji-hoon frowned. "Our intentions? We're on a routine patrol. Should I respond, sir?" "Tell them we're conducting standard operations, nothing more." On the planet Zelros, Trade Minister Vexital watched the human fleet's progress on his holographic display. The small, bird-like alien's feathers ruffled with anxiety. 3 months ago, the humans had ended a border dispute with the Korthak Empire in less than 2 weeks. The Korthak were known as the galaxy's finest warriors. They had surrendered after seeing what human soldiers could do. "They're heading toward the sanctuary worlds," Vextal said to his aide. "Those poor peaceful species won't last a day if the humans decide they want that territory." The aide, a younger Zelani with bright blue plumage, chirped nervously. "Should we warn the Galactic Council? What could the Council do? The humans have never broken any laws. They just take what they want through force, and everyone steps aside." Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. The humans had appeared in galactic politics only 50 years ago, but their reputation was already legendary. They came from a world so dangerous that every day was a battle for survival. Their planet had crushing gravity, violent weather, deadly diseases, and predators that would terrify most civilized species. Growing up in such conditions had made humans into something that other species couldn't understand. They were called Deathworlders. On the bridge of the Resilience, Chief Engineer Sarah Kim approached the captain. "Sir, all systems are running smoothly. The new weapons upgrades are performing better than expected." Ji-hoon nodded. The humans had learned to build their technology tough, just like themselves. Their ships were armored like fortresses and armed like battleships. Other species built elegant vessels that were works of art. Humans built machines that could survive anything. "How's the crew holding up?" Ji-hoon asked. "Happy to be moving again." You know how humans get when they sit still too long. It was true. Humans were restless by nature. Their dangerous homeworld had taught them to always be ready to fight, to run, to adapt. Sitting in dock for months had made everyone eager for action. Tactical Officer Marcus Chen looked up from his console. "Captain, we're picking up some unusual energy readings from the Sanctuary Worlds sector." The Sanctuary Worlds were famous throughout the galaxy. They were home to the most peaceful species anyone had ever encountered. The Luminari were beings of pure light who had never known violence. The podlings looked like children and acted with the innocence of children, even as adults. The Harmonics were creatures who spoke only in music and had never raised their voices in anger. These species had been given special protection by the Galactic Council. Their worlds were declared neutral territory, places where war was forbidden. For 1,000 years, no one had threatened them. "What kind of energy readings?" Ji-hoon asked. Marcus frowned at his instruments. "I'm not sure, sir. It's unlike anything in our databases. The signature is wrong somehow. Set course for the Sanctuary Worlds. Let's investigate." "Sir." Min-jun spoke up from communications. "I'm monitoring galactic news feeds. They're reporting that we're advancing on the Sanctuary Worlds with hostile intent." Ji-hoon felt a familiar frustration. No matter what humans did, everyone assumed the worst. When they had helped end the civil war on Centauri 7, the news called it human expansion through proxy conflicts. When they had shared their medical technology with plague-stricken worlds, It was reported as building dependency for future control. Let them think what they want, Ji-hoon said. We have our orders. But the truth was more complicated. Ji-hoon had read the same reports everyone else had. He knew how other species saw humans. They thought humans were conquerors who took whatever they wanted through violence. They didn't understand that humans had learned to fight because their world had given them no choice. They didn't see that every human carried the scars of a childhood spent surviving the impossible. What they really didn't understand was why humans fought in the first place. Dr. Hae-won Choi, the ship's medical officer, joined the group on the bridge. Captain, I've been reviewing the files on the sanctuary species. Their biology is fascinating. They've evolved in completely peaceful environments. They have no natural defenses, no concept of violence, no ability to protect themselves. Sounds nice, Sarah said. A world where you don't have to look over your shoulder every day. A world. Every day. Every day. Ji-hoon thought about Earth, with its earthquakes and hurricanes, its venomous spiders and stalking predators. Every human child learned early that the world was dangerous, that you had to be strong to survive, that sometimes you had to fight to protect what mattered. It wasn't a pleasant way to grow up, but it taught lessons that apparently no other species had learned. Energy readings are getting stronger, Marcus reported. Whatever's happening out there, it's big. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the sanctuary world's system. What they saw made everyone on the bridge fall silent. Ships. Thousands of them, unlike anything in their databases. They were dark, angular vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with predatory grace between the peaceful worlds, and wherever they passed, the beautiful cities of the sanctuary species went dark. My God, Sarah whispered. They're under attack. The communication channels were filled with panic. The gentle voices of the Luminari, the frightened cries of the podlings, the discordant wails of the harmonics. They were calling for help, but their calls were going unanswered. Every other species in the galaxy was too afraid to respond. All except one. Battle stations, Ji-hoon ordered, his voice calm and steady. Prepare for engagement. The human fleet moved forward, toward an enemy they didn't recognize and a battle they hadn't been ordered to fight. Behind them, the galaxy watched and wondered if they were about to witness the conquest of the sanctuary worlds by the feared Deathworlders. They had no idea they were about to see something very different. The first thing Captain Ji-hoon Park noticed about the enemy ships was how wrong they felt. Everything about them seemed to exist in opposition to life itself. Their hulls were a black so complete it hurt to look at, and they moved through space like hungry shadows. Sir, I'm getting readings from the closest sanctuary world, Marcus Chen reported, his voice tight with concern. The planet's surface temperature is dropping rapidly. Whatever those ships are doing, they're killing the world itself. On the main screen, the beautiful crystal cities of the Luminari were going dark one by one. The Luminari themselves were beings of pure energy who lived in structures of living light. As the enemy ships passed overhead, that light was being drained away, leaving only cold darkness behind. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the planet, Min-jun Lee said. It's Elder Lyrian, of the Luminari High Council. Put it through. The image that appeared on screen was barely recognizable as one of the galaxy's most advanced species. Elder Lyrian's usual bright glow was dimmed to a faint flicker. Her voice, normally a pure musical tone, was weak and filled with despair. Unknown vessels, this is Elder Lyrian of the Luminari. We do not understand what is happening. Our worlds are dying. Our people are fading. We have sent calls for help to the Galactic Council, but no one responds. If you have come to claim our resources while we are weak, please, at least spare the young ones. Ji-hoon felt something twist in his chest. The Luminari thought the human fleet had come to take advantage of their suffering. After a lifetime of being misunderstood, it still hurt to see that fear in another being's eyes. Elder Lyrian, this is Captain Park of the United Earth ship Resilience. We are not here to harm you. We detected the attack and came to help. Can you tell us anything about these enemy ships? The surprise in the Elder's voice was clear. Help? You came to help us? Yes, ma'am. That's what we do. It was a simple statement, but it carried the weight of humanity's true nature. Humans didn't fight because they enjoyed violence. They fought because someone had to. They had learned on their harsh homeworld that the strong had a duty to protect the weak. Dr. Hae-won Choi stepped forward. Elder, I'm a medical officer. Can you tell us what these attackers are doing to your people? They call themselves the Void Swarm. They arrived 3 days ago from outside our galaxy. They consume everything. Light, energy, life itself. They take it all and leave nothing behind. Our weapons do not work against them. Our shields cannot stop them. We have never faced anything like this because we have never needed to. Sarah Kim was already running calculations at her engineering station. Captain, I'm reading massive energy drain fields around those ships. They're literally feeding on the life energy of the planets. At this rate, the sanctuary worlds will be completely dead within hours. Marcus looked up from his tactical display. Sir, I count approximately 2,000 enemy vessels of various sizes. They appear to be focused on harvesting operations rather than combat preparation. I don't think they've noticed us yet. How many people are we looking at saving? Ji-hoon asked. The sanctuary worlds house approximately 50 million beings across all 3 species, Dr. Choi reported. The Luminari, the Podlings, and the Harmonics. 50 million innocent lives. An entire civilization of peaceful beings who had never hurt anyone, never threatened anyone, never even learned how to defend themselves. And they were about to be wiped out by creatures from beyond the galaxy while the rest of civilized space stood by and did nothing. Ji-hoon made his decision in the same way every human made such decisions. Not through complex political calculations or careful risk assessments, but through simple moral instinct. There were people in danger, and he had the power to help. All ships, this is the captain. We are going in. Primary mission is civilian evacuation. Secondary mission is stopping these void swarm ships from advancing further into our galaxy. I know we're outnumbered. I know this isn't what we came here for, but these people need our help, and we're the only ones here to give it. The response from his fleet was immediate and unanimous. Every ship reported ready for action. This was what humans understood. This was what they had been shaped by their harsh world to do. Elder Lyrian, we're going to start evacuating your people. How many ships do you have available for transport? Ships? We, the Luminari, do not use ships like yours. We travel as pure energy. But the Podlings and Harmonics have civilian vessels. Perhaps a few hundred, but they are not built for long journeys. That's all right. We'll make it work. Start gathering your people at the evacuation points. We're coming down. As the human fleet moved toward the sanctuary worlds, the galaxy watched. On Zelros, Trade Minister Vexistal stared at his display in confusion. Why are they slowing down? Why aren't they attacking the wounded planets directly? His aide was monitoring human military frequencies. Sir, they're talking about evacuation procedures, medical stations, refugee processing. That makes no sense. Why would they save the sanctuary species just to conquer them later? On the Korthak homeworld, war leader Thekmor was having similar thoughts. The humans are moving toward the enemy fleet. Are they planning to join with these void creatures? No, war leader, his intelligence officer reported. They're positioning themselves between the enemy and the civilian populations. They appear to be protecting them. Thekmor's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. The Korthak had fought humans and lost, but they had always assumed it was for territory or resources. The idea that humans would risk their lives for strangers was completely outside his understanding. Back on the Resilience, Ji-hoon was coordinating with his fleet commanders. Sarah, I need you to modify our transport systems to handle energy-based life forms. Marcus, I want fighter squadrons ready to provide cover for evacuation ships. Min-jun, establish direct communication with civilian vessels on all 3 worlds. Captain, Doctor, Choi interrupted. I'm reading massive life sign clusters in underground shelters on the Podling homeworld. They're packed in there like refugees. The comparison hit harder than it should have. Every human carried genetic memories of being refugees on their own world. Running from storms, hiding from predators, fleeing from natural disasters that could wipe out entire settlements. They understood what it meant to be small and afraid and completely dependent on others for survival. We'll get them out, Ji-hoon promised. All of them. The Void Swarm finally noticed the approaching human fleet. The response was immediate and terrifying. The dark ships turned away from their harvesting operations and began moving toward the humans with predatory intent. Sir, enemy vessels are changing course, Marcus reported. They're coming right at us. Good. Let them come to us instead of hunting civilians. All ships, engage the enemy. Show them what Deathworlders can do when someone threatens the innocent. The first human ship to open fire was the destroyer UES Defiance. Her captain had seen the Podling children crying in the evacuation footage, and something in those young faces had reminded him of his own daughter back on Earth. The battle for the sanctuary worlds had begun. But it wasn't the battle anyone expected. The first exchange of fire revealed something that chilled every human to the bone. The Void Swarm ships absorbed energy attacks and seemed to grow stronger from them. The beautiful, efficient weapons that other galactic civilizations built were worse than useless against an enemy that fed on energy itself. But humans hadn't built beautiful weapons. They had built weapons that could punch through anything. Kinetic weapons only. Captain Ji-hoon Park ordered across the fleet. These things eat energy, so we'll give them something they can't digest. The human ships opened fire with railguns, mass drivers, and old-fashioned explosive missiles. The Void Swarm ships, expecting more energy to feed on, were caught completely off guard. Solid projectiles moving at incredible speeds tore through their dark hulls, and chemical explosives detonated with satisfying violence. Direct hit on enemy cruiser, Marcus Chen reported with grim satisfaction. Hull breach, confirmed. They don't like our kinetic rounds. But even as they fought, the primary mission continued. Human transport ships were diving through the atmosphere of all 3 sanctuary worlds, their crews working frantically to evacuate civilians. And this was where humanity's true nature began to show. On the Luminari homeworld, Chief Engineer Sarah Kim had jury-rigged the transport systems to handle beings of pure energy. She stood in the cargo bay of the transport ship Freedom, watching as hundreds of Luminari refugees flowed aboard as streams of living light. Easy there, she told a frightened young Luminari who was flickering with fear. You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here. The young being's light pulsed with confusion. Why do you help us? We have nothing to offer you. We are not warriors like you. Sarah smiled, thinking of her own childhood on Earth. She remembered hiding in storm shelters while hurricanes raged overhead. Remembered the way the adults had protected the children, even when they were just as scared. That's exactly why we help you. Because you need help, and we can give it. On the Podling world, the situation was even more desperate. The small, childlike beings were huddled in underground shelters that were filling with toxic gas as the Void Swarm's energy drain affected their planet's atmosphere. Human soldiers in environmental suits were going from shelter to shelter, carrying out families that couldn't survive the journey on their own. Sergeant Maria Santos found herself carrying a Podling child who couldn't have been older than 5 in human years. The little being was crying for its parents, who were trapped in a collapsed shelter nearby. Don't worry, little one, Maria said, her voice gentle despite the chaos around them. My friends are getting your mama and papa out. You'll see them soon." The child looked up at her with large, trusting eyes. "Are you an angel?" Mama said. "Angels come to help when things are really bad." Maria felt her heart break a little. "Something like that, sweetie. Something like that." Meanwhile, Dr. Hae-won Choi was setting up emergency medical stations on every transport ship. The three sanctuary species had completely different biologies, but they all needed help. The Luminari were fading from energy loss. The podlings were suffering from atmospheric poisoning, and the harmonics were going into shock from the disruption of their musical language by the void swarm's presence. "I need synthesis units working on 3 different atmospheric mixtures," she called to her medical team, "and get me everything we know about energy-based metabolism. We're going to save every single one of these people." Back in space, the battle was intensifying. The void swarm had realized that their energy absorption didn't work against human weapons, and they were adapting. Their ships began changing shape, growing additional armor and weapons that fired projectiles of their own. "They're learning," Marcus warned. "Each wave is harder than the last." Ji-hoon nodded grimly. "Then, we learn faster. All ships. Pattern Delta. Use the asteroid field for cover, and hit them from multiple angles." This was what humans excelled at. Not just fighting, but thinking while fighting. Their dangerous homeworld had taught them to adapt quickly, to find solutions under pressure, to never give up even when things looked hopeless. The human destroyer Courage was taking heavy damage, but its captain refused to withdraw. She was providing cover for a transport ship full of harmonic refugees, and she would hold the line until they were safe. "Captain, we've lost main power," her engineering officer reported. "Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. We need to evacuate." "Not until that transport clears the gravity well," the captain replied firmly. "Transfer all remaining power to weapons. We'll give these things something to remember us by." Elder Lyrian watched from the bridge of the Resilience, where she had been brought for her own safety. The ancient being had lived for thousands of years, but she had never seen anything like what she was witnessing now. "I do not understand," she said to Ji-hoon. "Your people are dying to save ours. We cannot repay this debt. We have no armies to help you, no weapons to share, no territory to offer. Why do you sacrifice yourselves for nothing?" Ji-hoon looked at her with eyes that had seen too much war, but still held compassion. "Elder, with respect, you're wrong about having nothing to offer. You have something more valuable than weapons or territory." "What is that?" "You represent hope. You're proof that it's possible to live without violence, to build a civilization based on peace and beauty. If we let you be destroyed, we lose something precious that can never be replaced." The elder's light flickered with emotion. "But your people are warriors. You are Deathworlders. Why do you care about peace?" Sarah Kim overheard the conversation and smiled sadly. "Because we know the cost of violence better than anyone else. Every human child learns early that fighting is sometimes necessary, but it should never be the first choice. We fight so that others don't have to." On the Podling world, the last group of evacuees was being loaded onto transport ships. But there was a problem. A group of Podling children was trapped in a school that was surrounded by void swarm ground forces. The creatures had landed and were systematically draining the life from everything they touched. Lieutenant James Rivera volunteered to lead the rescue mission. "I'll take a squad in through the underground passages. We can reach the school from below." "Arman, it's too dangerous," his commanding officer warned. "Those passages might collapse at any moment." "Then we'd better hurry," James replied. He thought of his nephew back on Earth, probably in school at this very moment. Safe and protected. These Podling children deserved the same safety. The rescue mission was successful, but barely. James and his team emerged from the collapsing building with 17 terrified children, just as human fighter pilots strafed the void swarm forces. Every child made it to safety. In space, the tide of battle was beginning to turn. The human fleet was holding its own, but they were outnumbered, and the enemy kept adapting. More importantly, they were running out of time. The Void Swarm was calling for reinforcements from outside the galaxy. "Captain," Marcus reported, "long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures approaching from intergalactic space. Looks like at least 10,000 more enemy ships." Ji-hoon felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. They had managed to evacuate about half the sanctuary populations, but there were still millions of beings trapped on the planets below. When those reinforcements arrived, the evacuation would become impossible. "Send out a general distress call," he ordered. "All frequencies, all languages. Tell the galaxy what's happening here. Tell them what we're fighting for." Minjun looked up from his communication station. "Sir, should I include our tactical situation?" "Tell them everything. Tell them we're outnumbered, outgunned, and probably not going to make it. Tell them that if they ever cared about anything good in this galaxy, now is the time to prove it." The message went out across the galaxy, carried by every news network and military channel. For the first time, the civilized species heard the truth about what the human fleet was doing in the sanctuary worlds. They weren't conquering. They were dying to protect the innocent. And slowly, across dozens of worlds, something began to stir. The first to respond to the human distress call wasn't a government or a military fleet. It was Trade Minister Vextal of the Zelani, who had been watching the battle unfold with growing amazement. "Prepare my personal vessel," he ordered his startled aide. "Load it with every medical supply we have in storage." "Sir, you can't be serious. It's a battle zone, and the humans might think we're attacking them." Vextal's feathers ruffled with determination. "The humans are dying to save people they've never met. The least we can do is bring them medical supplies for their wounded." On the Korthak homeworld, War Leader Thek Moore was pacing in his command center, his forearms crossed in agitation. The proud warrior race had built their entire culture around the concept of honorable combat. What the humans were doing challenged everything the Korthak thought they knew about warfare. "War Leader," his aide ventured carefully, "the human fleet is requesting assistance. They're not asking us to fight alongside them. They're asking for evacuation ships." Thek Moore stopped pacing. In all his years of military service, no one had ever asked the Korthak to save lives instead of taking them. The idea was foreign, but strangely compelling. "Mobilize the transport fleets," he commanded. "If the humans can risk their lives for strangers, then the Korthak will not be shown up in honor by anyone." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. The scientific Viren were preparing their most advanced medical ships. The aquatic Delani were converting their cargo vessels into refugee transports. Even the mysterious Shadows, who rarely interacted with other species, were quietly moving ships toward the sanctuary worlds. But the reinforcements were still hours away, and the human fleet was running out of time. The Void Swarm's advance force had been pushed back, but barely, and the approaching enemy armada would overwhelm any conventional defense. Captain Ji-hoon Park stood on his damaged bridge, watching the tactical display with grim determination. Half his fleet was destroyed or crippled, but they had managed to evacuate nearly 40 million civilians. The remaining sanctuary populations were concentrated on 2 heavily defended worlds. But those defenses were failing. "Captain," Marcus Chen reported, his voice tight with strain, "the enemy reinforcements will arrive in 37 minutes. Current estimates suggest they'll overwhelm our position in under 10 minutes once they engage." "How many people are left to evacuate?" Dr. Haewon Choi looked up from her medical station. "Approximately 8 million. Mostly Luminari who are too weak from the energy drain to be moved safely. 8 million lives." Ji-hoon thought about his crew, exhausted from days of continuous combat. He thought about the other human ships, damaged and low on ammunition. He thought about the impossible odds they faced. Then he thought about a little podling girl who had given him a drawing she had made during the evacuation. It showed human ships surrounded by hearts, with the words, "Thank you for saving us," written in careful, childlike letters. All ships, this is the captain. I know we're tired. I know the odds are against us. But there are still 8 million innocent people counting on us. We're going to hold this line until every last one of them is safe. The response from his fleet was immediate and unanimous. Not a single ship requested permission to withdraw. Elder Lyrian, who had been quietly observing from a corner of the bridge, approached Ji-hoon. Her light was stronger now, fed by the hope that the human actions had given her people. Captain Park, I have been in communication with my remaining people on the surface. We have made a decision. What kind of decision, Elder? The Luminari have lived in peace for millennia because we never had to face true evil. We have been protected by our isolation and the goodness of others. But today, we have seen real courage. We have seen beings willing to die for strangers. We cannot hide while our protectors sacrifice themselves for us. Ji-hoon frowned. Elder, with respect, your people aren't equipped for combat. The Luminari are beings of pure energy. You'll be vulnerable to the Void Swarm's draining effects. Perhaps. But we have abilities that others do not. We can manipulate electromagnetic fields, disrupt communications, even overload electronic systems. If we are going to die anyway, let us die fighting alongside those who came to save us. Before Ji-hoon could object, the Luminari began to act. Streams of living light flowed from the planet's surface toward the human ships, surrounding them with protective energy fields. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Human shields were reinforced, weapons were supercharged, and damaged systems began to repair themselves. On the harmonic world, something similar was happening. The musical beings were using their sonic abilities to disrupt Void Swarm communications and create interference patterns that confused enemy sensors. Even the simple podlings found ways to help. Their small transport ships began serving as decoys, drawing enemy fire away from the larger evacuation vessels, while human fighters provided protection. My God, Sarah Kim breathed, watching her power readings climb beyond normal parameters. They're not just being rescued, they're fighting back. Marcus looked up from his tactical display with amazement. Sir, the enemy formation is breaking apart. They can't coordinate effectively with the harmonic interference, and the Luminari energy fields are disrupting their power absorption. It was working, but it wasn't enough. The enemy reinforcements were still coming, and when they arrived, numbers would overwhelm any tactical advantage. That's when the first Allied ship arrived. The Korthak transport vessel Honorbound dropped out of hyperspace and immediately began broadcasting on all frequencies. Human fleet. This is War Leader Thekmor. We have come to assist in the evacuation. Ji-hoon stared at the display in shock. The Korthak had never offered help to anyone before. They were warriors who respected only strength and honor. For them to come to aid in a rescue mission was unprecedented. War Leader, this is Captain Park. Be advised, you're entering a combat zone. We're heavily outnumbered and expecting massive enemy reinforcements. Thekmor's response carried a tone that sounded almost amused. Captain Park, the Korthak have studied human military tactics extensively since our last encounter. We have learned much about your concept of acceptable losses. Today, we will see if we understand the lesson correctly. More ships began arriving. Zelani medical vessels, Viren scientific ships, Delani transport fleets. Even species that had never worked together before were coordinating their efforts under human leadership. Trade Minister Vexatal's voice came over the communications channel. Human ships, we have medical supplies and emergency shelters. What do you need us to do? Minister, take position behind our defensive line. We'll protect you while you process the evacuees. Understood. And Captain Park? Thank you for showing us what real strength looks like. The Allied fleet was still forming up when the Void Swarm reinforcements arrived. 10,000 dark ships dropped out of hyperspace like a plague of locusts, their energy-draining fields immediately beginning to affect the local space. All ships, this is Captain Park. The enemy has arrived. Remember, we're not just fighting for the sanctuary worlds anymore. We're fighting for the idea that good people will stand up to evil when they have to. We're fighting for the belief that the strong have a duty to protect the weak. We're fighting for everything that makes civilization worth preserving. The battle was joined. And this time, humanity was not alone. Korthak warships fought alongside human destroyers. Zilani medical ships treated wounded from a dozen different species. Viren scientists shared tactical data with human officers. The sanctuary species themselves contributed their unique abilities to the defense. But the Void Swarm had learned as well. Their new ships were larger, more heavily armed, and equipped with reality distortion weapons that began tearing holes in space itself. "Captain," Marcus reported, his voice filled with dread. "They're not just trying to destroy us. They're trying to tear open a permanent gateway to intergalactic space. If they succeed, their entire species could invade our galaxy." Ji-hoon realized that this battle was about more than just saving the sanctuary worlds. It was about saving everything. All ships, priority target is the gateway generators. We have to stop them from completing that portal, whatever the cost. The final assault began. Ships from across the galaxy, led by the human fleet, launched themselves at the Void Swarm's Gateway project. It would be a suicide mission for many, but they went willingly, because they had learned from humanity what it truly meant to be a protector. The final battle for the sanctuary worlds would be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. It was the day when dozens of species, many of whom had never worked together before, united under a single cause. And leading them all was a human fleet that had never intended to become heroes. Captain Ji-hoon Park watched the tactical display as Allied ships from across the galaxy converged on the Void Swarm's gateway generators. The enemy's reality distortion weapons were tearing holes in space itself, and through those holes, he could see the endless darkness of intergalactic space filled with countless more void ships waiting to pour through. "All ships, this is our final run," Ji-hoon announced across the fleet. "Those gateway generators must be destroyed, or everything we've fought for will be meaningless. I want every ship to target the central command vessel. If we can take out their coordination, the whole system should collapse." War Leader Thekmore's voice came over the communications channel. "Captain Park, the Korthak fleet will clear a path for your assault. It has been an honor to fight alongside true warriors." "The honor was ours, War Leader." The combined fleet moved forward in a coordinated attack that would have been impossible just days earlier. Human destroyers provided covering fire, while Korthak cruisers smashed through enemy formations. Zilani medical ships stayed back to treat the wounded, while Viren science vessels fed tactical data to the combat ships. And surrounding them all, the sanctuary species contributed their unique abilities. Luminary energy beings supercharged Allied weapons and shields. Harmonics disrupted enemy communications with precisely tuned sonic attacks. Even the small podlings helped by using their civilian ships as decoys to confuse enemy targeting systems. The Void Swarm fought back with desperate fury. Their dark ships launched everything they had, and space filled with energy beams that absorbed matter and reality distortion fields that made navigation impossible. Ships from both sides were destroyed in the chaos, but the Allied fleet pressed forward. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, now commanding the engineering ship Defiant after her original vessel was destroyed, led a team of volunteers directly toward the largest gateway generator. "All power to forward shields. We're going in close." The Defiant's mission was to plant a series of kinetic charges directly on the generator's core. It was a one-way trip, but Sarah had volunteered without hesitation. Someone had to do it, and humans had always understood that sometimes the hardest choices fell to those who were strong enough to make them. Sarah, This is Ji-hoon. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. No, Captain, we can't. You know it, and I know it. Besides, someone needs to make sure these charges are placed correctly. I'm not trusting this to anyone else. The Defiant punched through the enemy defensive line with Korthak escorts clearing the way. Void swarm ships converged on the small engineering vessel, but they were met by a wall of defensive fire from every allied ship in range. Dr. Haewon Choi, coordinating medical operations from a Zalani hospital ship, watched the battle unfold with tears in her eyes. She had spent the last 3 days saving lives, treating wounded from species she had never seen before. Now, she was watching good people die to protect everything they had worked for. Doctor, her Zalani assistant said gently, the human ship has reached the target. On the Defiance bridge, Sarah Kim watched the massive gateway generator grow larger on her screen. The structure was impossibly complex, a twisted maze of dark energy conduits that hurt to look at directly. But her engineering training told her exactly where to place the charges for maximum effect. Charges armed and ready, she reported, beginning final approach. The Void Swarm command vessel, realizing what was happening, turned its most powerful weapons on the Defiant. The small ship's shields flared and failed under the assault, but Sarah held her course. Charges away. Impact in 15 seconds. All ships, clear the area. The Allied fleet began pulling back, but Ji-hoon realized that Sarah's ship was too damaged to escape the blast radius. Sarah, get out of there. Abandon ship. No time, Captain. Someone needs to make sure the charges detonate properly. Tell my family I was thinking of them. 0. The kinetic charges struck the gateway generator's core and detonated in a chain reaction that lit up the entire star system. The massive structure collapsed in on itself, and the reality distortions that had been holding open the intergalactic portal snapped back with devastating force. Void swarm ships throughout the system suddenly found themselves cut off from their reinforcements and their command structure. Without coordination, their formations dissolved into chaos. The remaining Allied ships pressed their advantage, and within hours, the surviving void vessels were retreating back into intergalactic space. The battle was won, but the cost had been enormous. A third of the human fleet was destroyed or crippled. Hundreds of brave volunteers from dozens of species had given their lives. The sanctuary worlds themselves were scarred and damaged, their beautiful cities reduced to ruins. But they were alive. All 3 species had survived. And more importantly, they had learned that they were not alone in the galaxy. Elder Lyrian of the Luminari found Ji-hoon in the medical bay of a Zalani hospital ship, where he was being treated for radiation exposure. The ancient being's light was warm and steady, no longer the flickering flame of desperation it had been days earlier. Captain Park, I wanted to thank you personally before you returned to Earth. Ji-hoon tried to sit up, but the Zalani medical equipment held him gently in place. Elder, you don't need to thank us. This is what anyone would have done. Lyrian's light flickered with what might have been amusement. No, Captain. This is what humans would have done. What you did here will be remembered for millennia. You showed the galaxy that strength can be used to protect instead of conquer. We just did our job. Your job was to patrol the outer rim. You chose to save strangers instead. That choice will echo through history. Across the galaxy, the news of the battle was spreading. The footage of human ships diving through atmospheric fire to rescue civilians, of human soldiers carrying alien children to safety, of human crews sacrificing themselves to protect people they had never met, was changing how everyone thought about the feared Deathworlders. On Zelros, Trade Minister Vexatal was addressing the Planetary Council. We have lived in fear of humanity for 50 years because we saw only their capacity for war. We failed to see their capacity for compassion. That ends today. On the Korthak homeworld, war leader Thekmor was making similar statements to his military commanders. We thought the humans were warriors like us, seeking glory and conquest. We were wrong. They are something greater. They are guardians. The Viren Scientific Council issued a formal statement. Humanity's actions in the sanctuary worlds represent the highest ideals of galactic civilization. Their willingness to sacrifice for others proves that their evolution on a dangerous world created not monsters, but protectors. 6 months later, Ji-hoon stood on the bridge of a new ship, the UES Guardian. It was the flagship of the newly formed Galactic Defense Fleet, a joint military force created specifically to protect peaceful worlds from external threats. The crew was mixed species, with humans working alongside Korthak warriors, Zelani medics, Viren scientists, and even volunteers from the sanctuary species. His first officer was war leader Thekmor, who had requested reassignment to serve under human command. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the sanctuary worlds. Elder Lyrian wants to speak with you. Put her through." The familiar warm light of the Luminari leader appeared on the screen. Behind her, Ji-hoon could see the rebuilt crystal cities of her homeworld. More beautiful than ever. "Captain Park, I wanted you to know that the reconstruction is complete. Our worlds are not just rebuilt, they are better than before. We have incorporated defensive systems, medical facilities, and communication networks shared by our new allies. We are no longer helpless, and we will never be alone again." "I'm glad to hear it, Elder. How are the children adapting?" Lyrian's light brightened. "They are well. In fact, they have created something for you." The screen changed to show a group of young beings from all 3 sanctuary species. They were holding up drawings and artwork that depicted the battle, but not as a scene of war. They had drawn it as a story of rescue, with human ships surrounded by hearts and protective symbols. A young podling stepped forward, the same child that Sergeant Santos had carried to safety. "Captain Park, we made these for you and all the humans. We want you to know that we remember what you did for us. We're going to tell our children, and they'll tell their children, so no one ever forgets the day the Deathworlders became our saviors." Ji-hoon felt his eyes water as he looked at the innocent faces on the screen. This was why humans fought. Not for territory, or resources, or glory, but for the right of children to grow up, safe and happy. "Thank you," he said simply. As the transmission ended, Thekmor approached him. "Captain, we're receiving requests from 17 different star systems asking for Galactic Defense Fleet protection. It seems word has spread about our mission." Ji-hoon smiled, thinking about Sarah Kim and all the others who had given their lives to prove that strength should be used to protect the innocent. "Then, let's get to work. Old friend, the galaxy is full of people who need protecting, and we've got a reputation to live up to." The UES Guardian and its escort fleet moved out toward their first assignment, carrying with them a new understanding of what it meant to be strong. They were no longer the feared Deathworlders of galactic legend. They were something better. They were the guardians who had learned that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the willingness to save those who could not save themselves. And across the galaxy, children of every species grew up hearing the story of the day when the most feared warriors in the galaxy chose to become heroes instead.